Welcome to Live the Dream with yours truly, Marty Kaiser. Buckle up and let's get started. Happy Friday, everyone. This is Marty Kaiser with our Friday podcast episode of Real Estate Tidbits. Hope everyone has had a good week. And for those of you that were looking for our Tuesday podcast, you got to hear an abbreviated and belated one that we aired on Wednesday due to an illness on my team. So nonetheless, everybody's up and running for Friday. And so I thought I'd start off with a twist. And we're going to talk about something we haven't chatted about before that's not exactly real estate related. And that's horse racing, specifically the Kentucky Derby. The Kentucky Derby is going to be tomorrow, Saturday. It's always the first Saturday of May, and it's the biggest horse race. It caters both to people that are real horse racing fans, as well as people that just like the pomp and circumstance and kind of the parade type nature of the Kentucky Derby. Just to give you a little history, the Kentucky Derby has been running for probably about 150 years. It takes place in Louisville, Kentucky. And it's part of what they call the Triple Crown Series. The Triple Crown Series are the top 3-year-olds in the country, have 3 big races in a fairly short period of time. The Kentucky Derby, which is the first week of May. Then the Preakness, which is 2 weeks after the Kentucky Derby. And that's held at Pimlico Racetrack in Baltimore, Maryland. And then the third leg of what they refer to as the Triple Crown is the Belmont, which is just outside of New York City in Belmont, New York. So those are 3 huge races. Some of the unique features about those races, they're only for 3-year-olds. So meaning horse years are like any other year. The difference is horses are considered to be of the next age group when January rolls around. So for example, if a horse was born, let's say in May of 2025, or a horse was born in March of 2025, when January rolled around, they would both be considered 1 year old. And so when they get to their 3rd birthday, then they're eligible for the Triple Crown Series. Now, there's a protocol for that. They have to be, of course, top race horses. Typically, most of them are fairly pricey when they were purchased. And they have to be nominated for what they call the Triple Crown Series well in advance. I believe when they turn 1 or 2 years old, they have to be nominated for the Triple Crown Series. So you have to make a decision early on, and there's some fees involved in nominating them. But they're very exciting, and the Kentucky Derby especially is unique for a couple reasons. Number one, it gets the largest field of any race in the United States. They typically will have 20 entrants. So if you've ever been to a physical racetrack or you've seen races on television, a 20-horse field is crowded. They actually have to use 2 starting gates for that to fit all the horses in. And so when they all exit what they call the starting gate, it's very jumbled. And so part of the Kentucky Derby relies more on the jockeys to try to steer their horses out of trouble. And many horses may either become at a big disadvantage or get eliminated due to the turbulence when they exit the gate up until the first turn. And historically in horse racing, horses that run more distance, meaning that they have to stay outside for a longer period of time, they're at a disadvantage because they're running a longer distance than horses that are closer to the rail. On the flip side, which makes it a little confusing for me explaining this, horses that are in the first post position, which is right next to the rail, they tend to not do well in this race because unless they're tremendous speed horses, they tend to get shuffled back and kind of at a big disadvantage. So you don't see too many horses from the one position winning the Kentucky Derby. The Preakness is 2 weeks later. What makes the Preakness so unique is that the Kentucky Derby is a 1.25 mile race, so it's the longest race that many of these horses will ever run. And then they go right to the Preakness 2 weeks later, so it's a grueling stretch for these horses. So that's why you only see a few of the horses from the Kentucky Derby run in the Preakness. Usually it'll just be the horse that won the Kentucky Derby and maybe a few of the other horses that had a good showing. And then the rest of the horses in the Preakness tend to be horses that are new runners. In other words, they didn't run in the Kentucky Derby. And the field tends to be a lot more manageable. There'll usually be somewhere between 8 and 12 horses in the Preakness. Then after the Preakness, the third rung of what they call the Triple Crown or the Crown Jewel is the Belmont. And the Belmont's one of the longest races in all of American racing. It's 1.5 miles. So many horses never run 1.5 miles in their entire career. Plus, it's the third race of this Triple Crown. So if any of the horses have run in the first 2 races, the Triple Crown is 3 weeks after the Preakness. So all 3 races are held within 5 weeks. So it's grueling. And there's been a lot of sentiment to spread these races out more to make them fairer tests. The reason that they haven't done that up to this point was a lot of people that are more traditionalists said, well, horses all through history have had to go through this same grueling event, so it wouldn't be fair to change the criteria for the races nowadays. So there's been talk about changing them, but as of yet they haven't changed it. But nonetheless, it's a very grueling series. And for a horse to win 3 of these races consecutively is very unusual. There's only been a handful of Triple Crown winners. The last one, I think, was approximately 5 or 6 years ago, and I could be a little off on this. Might be a little bit more than that even. And there's only been, through the history of horse racing, probably around 10 Triple Crown winners. So it's very tough to do, but it's always very exciting. The Kentucky Derby, what makes it unique, they have over 100,000 people that just go into the infield to watch this. So it's a festive party atmosphere, and people get dressed up. Most of your female attendees wear these fancy kind of bonnet-type hats, peacock style. There's all types of unusual and ornamental hats that are worn. They're usually big. They're pastel-colored, very festive and spring-like, and you have to see the Triple Crown races to really appreciate that. They're televised, and I believe NBC will be the one that televises them this year. The official race usually takes place somewhere between 6:30 and 7 o'clock at night. So for those of you that haven't seen one, that are interested after hearing my rendition, it'll be on at that time on NBC. Now this year they've got 20 entries scheduled. That could still change between now and Saturday, because occasionally a horse will get injured between now and Saturday through a freak occurrence. And so if they have any extra contestants that have wanted to get into the race but didn't qualify, they would take the spot. Right now there's 21 entries for 20 spots. So if any of the 20 entries have an injury, the 21st entrant would slide into that position. And there's a horse called Baeza that's the 21st entry. And actually, he's considered a very good horse. He only started running this year, where a lot of these horses started running in their 2-year-old campaign. So it should be very exciting. To give you a few names to look out for, the favorite in this race is a horse called Journalism. He's looked very strong in his races leading up to this race. He'll be the favorite in the race, meaning that when people bet on these horses and they call him the favored, they'll win less money if they bet the favorite than if a long shot comes in. So the favorite should be somewhere around 5-2 or 3-1. So meaning that if it's 3-1 and you bet $2, you get $8 back, which is a $6 profit for a $2 bet. There's people that are big gamblers, serious horse players that bets hundreds or thousands of dollars on these races. And so, but you can bet as little as $2. And they have all types of different wagering on these races. I won't bore you with the type of wagering, but there's a lot of different types. Some of the other contenders in this race are, they have a couple Japanese entrants headed by Luxor Cafe. They have an entry mate of one of the horses that's trained by Bob Baffert, who's a famous Kentucky Derby trainer called Rodriguez. And they have a number of other horses, but it should be a really great race to watch. So for those of you that are interested, definitely watch it. It's worth watching. The race itself only takes 2 minutes. It's all the stuff leading up to it that takes all the time. I always watch the race because I'm a horse racing enthusiast. In fact, years ago, I owned a couple of racehorses in partnership with a good friend of mine. So that was a lot of fun and very enjoyable. So that's all about horse racing. For those of you that have no interest, I apologize for boring you, but I try to come up with some diverse topics that you might not hear on other podcasts. Real estate-wise, well, where are we at with that? Well, one of the topics that I thought I'd go into a little bit, on last week's topic, I kind of went into the role of a realtor, why realtors do a lot more than people really understand, why realtors are underappreciated by many people, while realtors, unfortunately, sometimes have a negative perception of what they do, why a lot of people think realtors are overpaid, even though, in my opinion, they're not. So I went over that for a good bit last Friday. Today, I'm going to go over some of the other groups of folks that are involved in a real estate transaction. Probably your two most important, besides the realtors, are number one, the mortgage lender. The mortgage lender is the one, their company actually lends money to the buyer, assuming the buyer needs a mortgage and they're not a cash purchaser. So it's important that the lender be organized, that their rates be competitive, that they give accurate information so that both buyer and seller knows if the buyer that's trying to buy a particular home is well qualified, that the lender can do what they say they're going to do, that they can close the transaction in a timely fashion. And typically most mortgage transactions take about 4 to 6 weeks. You can have a couple different types of lenders. You can have banks, such as Wells Fargo, Bank of America. You can have mortgage bankers. They're mortgage companies that all they do is mortgages, but they directly loan their own money, so they have more control over the transaction. And then you have mortgage brokers, who are kind of what the word says. They can shop around and try to find customers the best situation for their needs. Of course, people think about the best situation, they automatically think about the lowest rates. And that's obviously one criteria, but probably equally or more important is there's some buyers that maybe aren't quite as strong as another buyer. So it's the mortgage broker's job to determine what lenders they work with can sufficiently get that deal approved, even though the buyer may have some things that would be less advantageous. And there's a lot of different levels of buyers. Everybody likes to work with buyers that have a perfect credit score, have unlimited income, have low debts and things of that nature. But unfortunately, we're not in a perfect world. So sometimes buyers may have credit that's just on the borderline. They may have income relative to their expenses that are just on the borderline. They may not have been in their job for quite as long. So all those variables have an effect on the mortgage going through. And there's certain lenders that are a little bit more liberal with that. It's also important that the lender that you use, not the company, but the loan agent, has a really good understanding of the buyer's needs versus their lending outlets. And when they package that loan up, they can put it in the most favorable position. So that's a crucial part of the deal. There's nothing worse than having a deal fall through at the 23rd hour because the lender didn't do what they say. And what happens in that case is, of course, the buyer's disappointed. The buyer spent money for a credit report and the various inspections they do and appraisal. So they may have $1,000, $2,000 invested that's non-refundable. The seller has made plans to move on, whether they're buying something else or they're moving out of town or whatever the case may be. So, of course, both sides are going to be very upset. And, of course, they're going to be upset with the lenders, but they're also going to blame the realtors. So that's why it's important for the realtor to do their due diligence to make sure that they're comfortable with that lender's expertise. If it's a lender helping the buyer, they need to have a favorite lender that they knew does a quality job. If it's a seller's lender, you have to interview the lender, at least I do. I kind of make sure that I'm comfortable with what the lender is telling me. If I'm not comfortable with what the lender is telling me, then I'll tell my seller that and suggest that we should have a different lender involved, at least to explain to us the buyer's credentials or the lack thereof. Because from a selfish point of view, all the time and effort and money I invest, if the deal doesn't close, I don't make any money, and I've spent all this time. The buyer's agents in the same boat, they've spent all this time helping the buyer and have nothing to show for it. And of course, the buyer and seller have additional expenses and inconveniences and those sort of things. So the lender is a crucial spoke in the wheel. So I'm very picky about the lenders that I like to affiliate with. The other important party, in most closings in Florida, you typically work through a title company. You could have an attorney do it, but I would say 90% of the closings that I do have a title company involved. And the title company is kind of the linchpin or the conduit. The title company gathers information from all sides. They work closely with the lender when it comes to getting close to the closing to make sure that all the paperwork is done properly, that they have the loan package in plenty of time. They're the ones that order the survey. They get the results of the appraisal. They do a background check of the property to make sure that they can give clear title insurance with no liens or clouds on it to ensure that the title is clear and that the deal ultimately closes. And sometimes they run into situations that have to be rectified. For example, does either party have any issues with the IRS that show up on their record that weren't disclosed? Does either group have a lien from a vendor, whether it's a utility company, maybe a credit card company? Do they have student loans that they have some kind of issue with? Do they have problems with the IRS? Hopefully not. So there's a lot of things that could pop up potentially. So it's the title company's job to do all this research and to disclose at their earliest convenience if there's any issues that pop up. And of course, if there are issues that pop up, then we have to determine, are they issues that can be taken care of, or are they issues that will preclude that deal from closing? So the sooner the better, and you want a title company that is right on top of things, that's an excellent communicator, and that I have confidence in. So when it's up to me, if I'm representing the seller, I have a title company that I like to use because I feel they've done a quality job for my customers. The manager gives me superior service. I'm not giving their name out at the time because I'm not running commercials or anything, so I don't want to be recommending vendors at this point. But I can tell you that that's a very important component. Now, you might say, well, how does the title company make money? Well, they make money two ways. And they don't get rich doing this because they have overhead. They typically have offices. They have staff, etc. But they make money with the cost of the title insurance that they charge the seller typically. The buyer may pay for a secondary form of title insurance called mortgagee title insurance, which is something that the lender requires and is typically paid for by the buyer. And then they also have a doc prep and transaction fee that the title companies charge to each side. So, for example, if you had a $500,000 sale, for example, and I'm just giving you real ballpark figures, the seller's title insurance would probably be in the neighborhood of $3,500 to $4,000. The buyer's title fees would probably be a couple $1,000s. And then the buyer has some other miscellaneous fees associated with the mortgage. So the fees are not inexpensive to the buyer and seller, but the title companies, when you factor in their overhead, their staff requirements and such, they don't get rich. Where they make their money is volume. So a good title company tends to stay very busy. And of course, part of that is market dependent. Right now in 2025 and in 2024, which was last year, the transaction volume in Central Florida was not what it was in 2023, 22, and 21. So by its very nature, title companies are going to make less money when there's less transactions. But their influence and importance cannot be overstated. They're very important. So if you think about, if you're looking at kind of a Venn diagram of a transaction, who are your three most important components? Well, it all starts with the real estate broker agent. Then it goes with the lender. And last but not least is the title company. But then you have some secondary components that are important. You have the inspectors. So you're going to get a home inspector, you're going to get a termite inspection, you're going to get a 4-point inspection for insurance purposes. You may get a pool inspection if you want a separate pool company to inspect the home. So there's a lot of inspections that take place. And then, of course, you have to get homeowners insurance. Well, as you know, if you've lived in Florida for more than a couple of weeks, homeowners insurance is very challenging. Our state government has done a horrible job in overseeing the homeowners insurance industry. So homeowners insurance is not that easy to get. It's quite expensive. A lot of the homeowners insurance companies cherry pick now. They want a newer roof. They just have a lot of requirements. They would like to never have a claim, which obviously, if nobody had a claim, they wouldn't need homeowners insurance. But of course, when they have these hurricane situations or they have climate change related, then our homeowners insurance claims are massive. The problem with that is when you're a consumer, a lot of times it's hard getting these claims paid because the claims are so significant when there's a hurricane situation that you read about a lot of horror stories with the homeowners insurance either drawing the process out or trying to not pay the claimant. So homeowners insurance is a very stressful component. And so there's a lot of tentacles in a real estate transaction. Hopefully that gave you a little oversight into what takes place. And that's why selling a house is not an easy task. And that's why most of the people involved, if they're good quality people that are skilled practitioners, they're in the minority, but they stay quite busy because they're good at what they do, and they're well worth their fees. So hopefully I've given you a little insight into how a real estate transaction works from start to finish. If you have any questions, again, please call me. This is Marty Kaiser, 407-595-9700. Or you can email me at marty@floridasells.com. Everybody have a great weekend. Let's sell some real estate, and Marty Kaiser out.